welcome everybody. It's super nice to see you, that you're all taking time out to kind of join us here to talk about developing your own brand, because we are all unique. So that is really important, that we also kind of making sure that we also display that in our unique way. So branding is actually nothing new. So branding has been existed for thousands of years, from the Catholic Church to artists. But I think especially over the last 20 years, especially through the internet and social media, branding has become kind of to a whole new level, especially if you are a company or also an individual person. So I'm starting off with a couple of quotes that I always find really impactful. Especially a brand is not just a logo, a website, or your business card. It is an experience. So people want to interact with a brand. And also Seth Gooding also says, every interaction is any form is branding. So just that we, have that actually in the back of our heads when we build our own brand for our own business, because it's really important that we live and breathe it and that we are our brand. I think defining your brands. So these are kind of a few suggestions on how you can actually define your brand and who you are. So it's kind of an exercise that you can do later on or whenever you kind of have time to sit down. It's also not something that you literally can do in 10 minutes, but that you actually have time and can also develop on it and kind of you can always add. But that you think about, what are you passionate about? What are your inspirations? What are your values? Make sure that you include them in your DNA of your brand. That you also define your overall intentions and purpose. And we're going to come to that further on some slides. But also making sure that you are the brand and that people can feel it, because people do feel it subliminally. I think for me also one of the key things is that you have to build on your strengths, because your strengths, it comes naturally and easy to you. So you actually don't waste a lot of energy. Because I am also a firm believer is like, if you have to work hard for it, it's not always necessarily that it is, your core strength and comes easy to you. I think one of the things that we also sometimes forget, don't talk about your weaknesses, drop all those little fill words that you have, especially when you write your website, your copy for your website or any marketing material, if it is emails or LinkedIn posts and so forth, because they always kind of have the tendency to sneak in. And also whatever you build, jump into it with both feet, do it 150% or not at all, because I think, especially if some of you had, a 9-to-5 job and actually started their business as a side hustle, you actually notice that the side hustle only really, really takes off once you quit your 9-to-5 job, because you're fully committed and you're kind of jumping in, but also, just trying to go literally overboard and just, pushing your own boundaries in order to achieve your dream. Then also what you need to kind of explore is your target audience and your competitors. So before you kind of jump into creating your brand and everything, you need to understand, who are your competitors? How many competitors are you? Are you local? Are you international? That you kind of research, how do they, who are they catering to? Are they the same people that you're catering to? Are they different? Who are your low-hanging fruits of customers that you can easily kind of convince and kind of make your, ideally regular customers, next to your family and friends, of course, but it's just kind of ensuring that you have a base there. And then also making sure, how do your customer actually talk? Do they have a certain language? Just also develop a language that they easily understand as well, because that's really important to connect to your consumers and also have an interaction with them, because the interaction, meanwhile, is really important. From a positioning point of view, your brand cannot be everything to everyone. So just kind of, you really have to be quite specific and, just kind of that you realize that from the get-go. This is also another exercise that you can do, which also helped me, is, think about 3 to 5 adjectives that describe your purpose or your brand. Another way of doing it is, for instance, looking at a metaphor, if it is with an animal or a sports team or, even a car, and just kind of saying, what are the qualities, what are they, that you want your brand to have? Because sometimes thinking about your brand just abstract is sometimes a bit difficult. And if you kind of use a metaphor, it is easier to kind of translate that into it. Overall, but the summary of all of it is you need to find your unique value proposition, because this is the only thing that you're competing with. So also next to all of your competitors, that is things that make you stand out. People engage with you and not anybody else. So find it, and just make it yours. So this is a brand's bullseye. Not sure if any of you actually seen this before, but especially in advertising or branding, this is something that you work a lot with, and just defining, all the different values, mission, vision, and purpose to define your brand. There are different ways of actually tackling this. This is, sometimes I personally find it easier to build it from the values from the inside out, to start small and then go into the bigger vision. But other people, have a different thought process and structure. They actually like to kind of start it from the outside and go inside. This is really helpful. You might have your own brand, your own personal brand right now, and you're working solo. However, but if you, for instance, start employing people or growing, then it is really valuable to have something like that, because when people start working for you, then they can kind of read this, they can actually sell you better, they understand what the company stands for and so forth. And it's kind of giving them a really good, view of the brand in depth as well. And so the value is more or less what we believe and how we behave. The mission is the mission statement, the statement that describes exactly how you put your purpose into action. So the overall bigger purpose. And the vision is, how you envision your future. The purpose is the reason why your company exists. It lives beyond the financial goals and doesn't include any methods and so forth. So since that is also a bit of abstract, I try to kind of include actually my brand and my kind of bullseye for my company. So for me being, a business consultant and coach. So I started from the bottom up, my values, me being nurturing, team building, lightness, drive, authenticity, cross-border respect. And then moving up to my mission, I bring cross-cultural experience with my background, strategic advice from high-performing industries like advertising, to empowering individuals and small business owners to transform and grow. And my vision is to provide everybody with their inner tools and resources and confidence for sustainable growth, to find your own authenticity and dreams for your path ahead. And the purpose, to coach professionals in the creative industry to discover their hidden doors, to find their true voice and colors. So it's kind of shows you more or less two sides of the coin, more the theory, and this is more kind of a practical example that you can kind of, envision it better and perhaps also work on your own, bullseye. So now I'm going into depth on your vision and also things for you to kind of consider, when you kind of build your vision. I think from the vision, it starts off with your name. Find a brand name that is unique to you and to your business. Some use their actual name, like I've used my actual name. But if you don't use your name and you make up a name, that is great as well. But also just double check, is the URL still free before you decide on it? And especially if you're working on an international level, it's super, super important to kind of make sure that people can pronounce it, spell it, and that it works across, different cultures and languages. I think the best example is that one car brand came up with the name, worked fantastically here in Europe, and then in Asia, it meant something completely different and it bombed. So you have to kind of just making sure, depending on how and where you're going to work, or that you're also flexible on that. Of course, you can also create, a short and snappy slogan as well. Some people have that, some don't, depending how you like to have and develop your brand. Elevator pitch, super important. So create your elevator pitch to tell people in 10 seconds, what you do. Write it down, craft it, refine it, run with it. I think the thing is you have to repeat it over and over again until you literally, it is part of your kind of normally, it comes normally. You don't kind of, start babbling about it and things like that. Because at one point, once you repeat it over and over again, it just kind of flows. And then it really sinks in, for you, but also for other people. They can feel that as well. And, especially at the beginning, when you work on your elevator pitch, you can tell by the reaction of other people, or just kind of, verbally, or also, by their body language, it didn't go down very well. But then you just refine it, or you can kind of also tweak it depending on your audience. I think that is fine as well. But just kind of that you also look at different variations of it. So your look and feel, of course, is super important for a brand, especially in the creative industry that we're all kind of from. So things to kind of consider also when you work on your brand is if it is, photography, imagery, illustration. Choose a style that represents you to ensure, that it stands out from the crowd. Just kind of that. If people go onto your Instagram account or, see your post on LinkedIn, that they can recognize, oh, this is from you because, that photography style, or she only used illustrations. So it's like visually already, they already associate it with you. Then also one of the kind of common things to consider, and that is also where people sometimes gets quite excessive about, is fonts. My suggestion would always be to choose 1 or 2 fonts, and also use a font that tells a story. Then also just make sure that the font that you use 3 different sizes, but not more. Don't go crazy, because then it gets really confusing, and it's just also too much overload, visual overload. But of course, also just ensure legibility, especially when you have it on an image, because that's really important. Also regarding layouts, more is not always better. Layout needs to space and breathe. And, some people take it to one extreme with the super minimalism, and others are kind of more on the functional end. So you also need to kind of decide what feeling do you want to bring across, and where do you want to sit. Okay. Because everything has subliminal communication. So everything that we see and hear, and especially with color, we can communicate so much with color. Colors have meaning, so use them as highlights, accents, and I'm going to show you a few slides afterwards that kind of give you a good indication how color really works. And just kind of, and then you're perhaps also saying, oh, yeah, I recognize that. But also, from a copy standpoint, simple language that is easy to understand, especially if you're working, cross borders or with an international community, that it is simple language that everybody can understand, especially not if it's not their native language. What usually also helps is bite-sized, short and snappy content, to kind of that people don't get super overwhelmed by everything. And of course, engagement, create a dialogue with your customers, give them a voice, feedback or for review. But I think this is meanwhile actually the norm, due to Instagram and Facebook and all of that, to literally also have an engaging brand. I think 15 years ago, brands' behavior was very different, and it was literally one-sided, the brand communicating to the consumers. But now it's more literally ongoing conversations that consumers can also feed into. So here I kind of have an overview, this slide and the next slides, just to kind of show you kind of what, how colors can have an emotional trigger, from, excitement, from red, from desire, excitement, energy, to also green with hope, growth, balance, reassurance. You can also see that in our daily lives, from hospitals that use a lot of green, technology companies use a lot of blue. Here we got that slide where you actually can see all the different brands. what kind of colorways they use and what they are trying to subliminally kind of communicate on this, which I actually really like that, because it kind of makes it really tangible. And then also with a brand, be consistent. That is literally, super important across all platforms, communications, touch points, reuse imagery with different crops, because they also have all different, guidelines, rewrite copy that is relevant to the channel. So it's not the same copy for LinkedIn as it's for Instagram or for Facebook, or just for also emails that you have. And I think overall, but most important, be genuine and live your brand values. So here we go into tone of voice, also similar to the elevator pitch, tell your story. Find a narrative that tells your story from start to end, that gets people hooked, and that you can kind of get them engaged, and that they actually can recommend you, because that is the key, when people actually can recommend you, because that is such fantastic business over and over again. So going on to behavior. I already touched base on that briefly, but be your brand, live your brand, be impactful, make a difference. You should always also adapt your brand. It's not a static thing. We are not static. We as people, people move on, brands move on, communities change, times change. So we need to kind of be adaptable. Build ideally your own community when you have a brand, when you have, then you can have your community support system, then you can have interaction with it. And also, I think, especially when you build a support system, make sure that you also, give back, because especially when you build your own brand, and if you start your own business, you must know this as well. It's just, you get so much support at the beginning, sometimes from really places that you would have never thought of or unexpected. And it's just also really important to kind of give it back, or at least I'm a firm believer of that. So now we're going to touch points. Touch points to consider. I'm not saying that you have to do all, I also think less is more. Some people like Twitter, depending on your business. Sometimes, Instagram is better, sometimes Facebook, website, LinkedIn, and so forth. But it's for you to decide. But I think less is more, and as long as you do it right. I think one of the things that I actually included, and a lot of people I think forget, is the Google SEO, the maps, and the kind of setting up your own business. It's really important. So because all the algorithms that are kind of now living, in the World Wide Web, just making sure that people can actually find you. And so those are the little nuggets, I think, that just kind of help you kind of get that extra bit. And here, I might not go into this in detail, but I've literally put 2 slides of checklists together and just things to kind of for you to think about. So in case you kind of are building your own brand or brands for clients, or, that all these things that you might want to consider and just tick off. I personally loved checklists, but that is just my personal preference. Yes, and super short summary, know yourself, know your strengths, your capabilities, and your creativity. And be your message, communicate your message to the audience and be consistent and over again. And put yourself in opportunities ways. I think that is really important, especially as an entrepreneur. You can't just sit there and wait until stuff comes to you. You need to go out and you need to hunt, and just kind of do crazy stuff, push yourself out of the comfort zone, and just, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And sometimes, you just grow as a person to it.